This is Whiskey Whereabouts. I'm Tim, and this is not Glenkinchie 12 year. It is a Distillery Exclusive Glenkinchie at 48%, partially matured in some American oak Brandy Casks. What is Glenkinchie like when it has a proper ABV, and what are those Brandy Casks bringing to the table? We're going to find out. My whiskey journey has taken me to Scotland and back. I've explored whiskey education, tastings, and distilleries from Islay to Speyside. And now my journey continues here, with you, on Whiskey Whereabouts. So if you don't already know, Glenkinchie is a Diageo distillery, and it is designated as one of the four corners of Johnnie Walker. This is for visitor center purposes. Diageo has set up elaborate visitor centers with Johnnie Walker branding at one distillery in each of four regions. And for the Lowlands, it's this distillery, Glenkinchie, which is also known as the Edinburgh Malt. Not because it's in Edinburgh, because it isn't exactly. They'll pick you up in a bus and shuttle you over to the distillery and bring you back. Make it very easy for anybody who's just visiting Edinburgh, wants to see a distillery. When we see it on the shelves, we see it in the form of that 12-year, that standard disappointing Diageo presentation, the 43%, the chill filtration, and the color added at a pretty high price, honestly, for the whiskey that you're getting, in excess of $70. I don't know anybody who actually buys that. As for this bottle, this is a 48% ABV offering, and it was matured in a vatting of Hogsheads and American oak Brandy Casks. So when we talk about Hogsheads, we're talking about a larger cask, right? We're talking about a cask that's 250 liters. It was a Distillery Exclusive a couple of years ago, 6,000 bottles in the batch. I doubt there's many of these left. So I'm sharing this today, number one, to talk about what it's like to have a decently presented Glenkinchie, and number two, what can you learn or infer about these casks, these Brandy casks, and their influence on what is a pretty straightforward, pretty light whiskey by default. And I said decently presented, 'cause we have a couple of problems here. We got a nice ABV. At that ABV, I would assume that there's no need for it to be chill filtered. Nowhere on this bottle does it say non-chill filtered and no color added. I assume it has color added. No age statement. So we have no idea how old this whiskey is. So going to go ahead and nose the Glenkinchie, a Distillery Exclusive here, neat. The neck pour was sharp, just straight up sharp. This isn't sharp, but it has that sort of, spirity sort of alcohol element without being hot. It's 48, it's not nothing. It really doesn't come off as abrasive, but that neck pour, it was pretty sharp and really greeted me with a lot of what I would think of as some youth. And I am getting what I expect, that real sort of lavender bouquet garden sort of floral element coming right off the whiskey. But there is a totally separate element here that I don't associate with Glenkinchie 12 year. It's buttery. It's almost toasty. There's a little bit of this sort of creaminess. Is that the Brandy casks? I can't say. The Glenkinchie that I kind of think of has that floral note, has that cereal note, citrus, maybe some apple, maybe a little bit of oak once we get into actually tasting the whiskey. This is richer. And when I think of Brandy casks, I think of fruit element coming in. I think of a tart fruit, probably, is how I would describe it. I see discussion talking about these types of casks, talking about some spice coming in, the way that baking spice comes in from sherry. This, I can definitely see underneath a little bit of a spicy, a nutmeggy type of spice underneath, real buttered roll. That's why I said toasty. It's not. It's like a warm roll with some butter on it. It's pretty intriguing. It's not complicated, but that richness really pairs with what I'm expecting from this whiskey, and these other elements kind of sitting on top, and it gives it a little bit of depth where it doesn't feel too sharp. So on the palate now, neat. Decently rich mouthfeel here. 48%. Bodes well. There is a pretty rich vanilla, toffee, don't think of from the 12-year. A just dash of red pepper flakes. It gives it a liveliness. It's pretty nice. A little bit of oak, little bit, pretty subtle, but bitter, tannic, present. And there is a berry underneath. It is like a not quite ripe berry. I wouldn't say it's a full sort of sour or tart, but it isn't sweet, but it does have that quality. And that, I think, is probably the influence from that brandy cask. Returning for the finish, but neat. It comes in and really, as it develops, it really kind of falls off a cliff. There is a sweet and then a balancing sort of bitter element. Then it just keeps going. It's much more subtle. It's turned down, but I gotta say it's full sort of medium. It doesn't really get past the tongue. I don't really feel anything, warmth or developing anything, but I do still have the sweetness and a dash of that sort of casky, sort of tannic bitter. This is pretty light, mild, sort of vanilla, not really creamy, but it has that vanilla quality. The toffee is still there. There is I'd say it's full lemon now. It's full citrus, sour citrus now. With that sort of, like I said, that sort of just a bit of that cask bitter. It's not full coffee ground. It's a little too low in the mix for that. And I would say that this has really improved being open. And it hasn't been open that long. It's been open, I would say, less than 7 days. And the neck pour was a little sharper on the nose and a little less balanced, especially on the finish. I really could feel these two sides fighting. That sweet vanilla, that sort of bitter element. And now it seems more sort of integrated. It doesn't really need for drinking, but let's see if I can hit it with a little water. Maybe I can coax out something different, something new in this whiskey. Don't have much left here. I don't want to overwater it. Come back and see what we can find. It has brought a lot of fruit to the surface. It is almost watermelon, that type of fruit element. Yeah, orange. There's peach orchard fruit. That tighter kind of floral, the thing that I'm expecting, I'm getting all kinds now with this water of full fruit elements. That buttery texture is still there. It's not as cereal. That toasty roll is gone. There's a new leather element underneath here. The spices are underneath. Baking spice, but not cinnamon and not sugar, like a nutmeg, that type, like we were talking about before. It's there in the mix. What a difference hitting this with the water has done. Now let's see if it's ruined the palate. It's a lot of the same. Mouthfeel suffered, but the flavor is pretty much there. It's pretty intriguing proposition. Hit this one with a little bit of water to get a little bit more of that fruit opened up on the nose. You're not giving up much. You're not gaining anything, but you're not giving up much on the palate. Let's go back for the finish really quickly. The finish is hanging in there. It's persevering to still medium, but a little shorter, but it's still going. That sour citrus, maybe unripe berry, maybe it's much higher in the mix. The lemon is more lemon cleaner. It's like a little bit astringent rather than like fresh squeezed lemon juice. And the tannic bitter is pretty high in the mix now. The rest of the elements are still there, but they're sort of inverted a little. I don't love that. It's still going. It's not still going now, but it was still going when I started talking. With the sweetness, a little bit of the cask sort of tannic element, but again, that's sour. Now, is this the tart berry, that brandy cask I was talking about? Who can say? It's not the best whiskey I've ever had. It's not the best Lowland whiskey I've ever had. It is a pretty rich whiskey for what I expect this to be. And I am going to say it's probably 3.5 glasses. I'm not gonna do value on this. It was reasonably priced for what it's worth. I hope you enjoyed me sharing this sort of slightly unusual whiskey with you today. Make sure you hit this big button. You know what to do over here so you don't miss any of the future videos on the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.